Hello, everyone. You're listening to For Those We Lost. I'm your host, Jennifer Sullivan. Thank you for being here. If you've lost a loved one to COVID and would like to share your story on the show, please send me an email. My email address is forthosewelostpodcast@gmail.com. Or you can go to the website, forthosewelostpodcast.com, and click on the contact button, and you can reach me that way as well. In this show, people share their stories of losing a loved one to COVID. Every story you hear in this show is full of heartbreak, grief, loss, and frustration, but they are also full of love and hope. We talk about how we are coping, we talk about how to keep the memory of our loved ones alive, and how isolating our grief is as the world wants to move on. You'll hear us talk a little bit about the vaccine and politics, and you may not agree, but I hope you'll keep listening because each person who shares their story on the show has experienced profound grief over the loss of a loved one. And that's something we will all experience. We all love someone, we will all lose someone we love, and we will all grieve. These are the stories of those we lost to COVID. Thanks for being here with me today. I've got a great show coming up for you. In this episode, I'm joined by Mary and her daughter Tammy. Mary lost her husband in October of 2020, and Tammy reached out to me because she knew that her mom wanted to talk about it, but wouldn't have reached out to me on her own. Mary and her husband Bob were married for almost 57 years. And Tammy told me that her mom had a lot of anger about losing her husband to COVID. Of course, Tammy lost her father too, so I had them both on the podcast so that they could talk about Bob and be there for each other. For context, we recorded this episode on October 25th, 2021. Tammy and Mary mentioned the white flags in Washington, D.C. If you'd like to learn more about that and where those flags are now, the information is in the show notes below. And now, I'd like to welcome Mary and Tammy to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have been doing a lot of thinking the last couple days about this because I know one of the things that I ask guests about is coming up on 1 year. And you both are coming up on your 1 year mark of Mary, your husband, dying this Friday, right?
Right.
Yeah. So I really want to make sure that we touch on that. But where I want to start, Mary, with you is what was going on in your life in September, October, before your husband went in the hospital and then ended up getting COVID?
Well, a lot of doctor's appointments. He had sugar, so we were dealing with that. And also just his terrible cough. And it would just be awful during the day and at night. And we were running to doctors to see what we could do about that. And then also with his kidney dialysis, we were running back and forth at least twice a week. That's a long time to do that. I mean, every day it seemed like something was coming up that we needed to take him to the doctors. And finally, right before everything happened, October the 29th, he just couldn't breathe properly. So our friend who is a doctor said we need to get him to the hospital, and that's when it all started with the COVID.
Okay. So, from what I understand, he went into the hospital and he was diagnosed with COVID, right?
Well, the very sort of the last time when he went in, he didn't have the COVID, but he was only there 4 days. They released him, and he was only home for about 2 days, and he went back in the hospital, and that's when they diagnosed him with COVID.
Oh, that's right. I remember that now. We had talked about that earlier. He was there and they said he didn't have COVID and sent him home.
Right.
Do you think the cough that he was struggling with in the weeks before, was that just a normal cough that he had, or was that something new that you think was leading up to him having COVID?
I think it was leading up to COVID because it was never as bad as when he went into the hospital. His breathing, he couldn't breathe and catch his breath right. And he was so afraid, he was going to die right then because it was so bad.
Oh, wow.
We knew we had to get some oxygen in him, for him to breathe properly.
Yeah. So, what was your life like in the months leading up? I know this is changing track a little bit, but as a family, were you seeing each other? Were you isolated? Did you have people bring you groceries? How were things for you?
Really rough because, like I said, it seemed like we were always having appointments at doctors, and no one seemed to help him with his cough. And that was the hardest part at night, and then being hooked up with this dialysis. But things did get smoother, and we thought things were going to be okay because we could go out to the grocery store. He could go with me, and it was easy. I mean, it wasn't tough to do things like that. But then when he started to really get that deep cough and couldn't catch his breath, that was the stop of everything for us.
Yeah. Yeah, so needing to go to the hospital and go to doctor's appointments and be seen so many times, it was practically impossible for you to stay isolated from just the world outside of your house.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Tammy, how about you? As a family, did you go over? Did you do a lot of FaceTime visits or did you spend time with them?
I actually, the universe has a way of working out. I actually moved back in with my parents back in June of 2020.
Wow.
It,
What the timing on that is just crazy.
I know it really was. And I know everything happens for a reason, you know, didn't know at the time why. But so I was here. And at the time we were working, I was able to work from home
Mhm.
due to, the pandemic and everything like that. So I was able to be here, and help around the house and things of that nature. And when we did go back into the office, so that was June when I came back home. And then probably, I think that September, we went back into the office. And when I would come home, I mean, we wore our mask at work. I wore my mask when I came home, washed the hands, all that, and just wiped everything down just, because I was afraid, to give something to mom or dad.
Mhm.
And so, I constantly, I kept my space. And when I, couldn't, obviously I had the mask on and things like that. So it was, I guess, a blessing in disguise that I was able to be here.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like it. It sounds like it. And I remember you speaking to me and telling me that you were able to help with your dad's medical needs when he was at home.
Yes, like mom just stated, he did dialysis at home in the evenings, and for about a year and a half or so. And, mom was here, for a whole year or so, just doing it herself, carrying those bags and everything, his medicine and things like that. So, when I was able to be here, I was able to help. And I was just like, oh my gosh, how did you do this by yourself practically, for a year?
Yeah.
So, and as mom said, he was a diabetic. So he, was just like, could you give me my shots? And I'm just like, of course. Anything that I could do to help, that's what I was, here for. And that's what daughters do. And I do have two older sisters. You talked about, limiting, access and stuff like that, having folks come in and whatnot. They were afraid to come in as well. So, even though we didn't even dream, he would have COVID or any of us, we just kind of, kept the precautions up. We did a lot of FaceTiming, with my sisters and my daughter and, my nieces and, nephews and stuff like that. So, I mean, it was hard. I mean, it was tough.
Yeah.
But he got very, very spoiled with Tammy being here. He would go in the evening and he'd say, "You going to give me my shot tonight, Tammy?" And she'd say, "Well, yeah." Well, he got out of that. And then we'd help him hook up all his dialysis stuff for his kidneys. And he'd just lay there and just ate it all up, But we babied him and we loved it. We loved doing it. And it made it so much easier on him. I don't know how he ever did it. I don't. I mean, it was tough. With that tube in his stomach, it was not the best. But we helped him as much as we could, and we don't regret a minute of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk about he goes into the hospital and he's there for 4 days and say he doesn't have COVID and they send him home. What happened in the days after that and leading up to him going back to the hospital?
Well, that's when he got weaker and weaker, and that cough just wouldn't go away. And like I said, a friend of ours who's a doctor, I called him because he lives down the street. I said, "What do you think we can do for this cough?" And he looked at Bob and he said, "We need to get him to the hospital now."
Mhm.
And that was it. I mean, that was the last we got to see Bob. We couldn't go in because we had to sit in the parking lot and wait for, the nurses to call us and tell us that things were looking better. And then the next day they'd call and they'd say, "Well, we have to vent him." And that just tore us up. And then the next day they said, "Well, we have to put a tube in the side of his neck." And nothing was getting better. Nothing. Every day we wait for good news and it just wasn't. And the last day they called us and they just said, "You need to get up here." I said, "I'm not coming by myself." I said, "I have 3 daughters and they've got to come with me." And they said, they checked and they said, "Come on up." And he did not know us because he was out of it. And I say coma, wouldn't you, Tammy?
Heavily
Sedated.
sedated. Yes.
So we held his hands, but no movement. And that's what was the hardest thing, was to say goodbye to him when he didn't know us. I mean, that was never did I think living with someone for 57 years that I couldn't be with him when he died.
Yeah. How wonderful for you, though, that you were able to have your daughters come in with you. Because I've heard so many stories of people who have to go in alone, like one person in the family can go in.
Oh boy. Nope, I insisted. I don't know how I did it, but I insisted. I said, "We all have to be there." And we
Yeah.
dressed. We dressed in those suits and the whole 9 yards, but we didn't care what we had to do. We were going to get in there.
Yeah. Yeah, you were like a mama bear in that moment.
Yeah, I was more like a grizzly bear.
Yeah.
I will say that when he came home from the hospital. And, he was having the issues breathing. I mean, I think we would not talk in front of him, of course, and talk in the other room like, okay, do you think he has COVID? And we're just like, no, they would have told us. He's having the issue breathing, we're, he's having to sleep setting up, and he would just cough and he couldn't get comfortable. And so, I'm bringing out the cool mist humidifier and, just anything, thinking, okay, he's got a really bad cold.
Mm-hmm.
He never once said, I can't smell, I can't taste, because I remember we'd be like, okay, can you taste this, Dad? Yes. Can you smell this? Yes. I mean, so he just, as Mom said, he was just so weak.
Yeah, that was it. He was so weak.
And it was a Thursday night, and the day before he went into the hospital, it was a Thursday night, and he was just hacking. He couldn't sleep. He was restless, and really, I mean, he didn't have an appetite. He slept a lot. Mom and we told him, if you want to go to the hospital, we will take you now. And he's just like, I'm okay. Let's see how I feel in the morning. Well, here comes Friday, October 23rd, and he's not good. And so I think, Mom, you asked him if he wanted to go to the hospital, and he said yes.
Mm-hmm.
And he started to go into cardiac arrest, actually. He had a history of heart disease. He had a pacemaker, defibrillator. And so, never once again did we think, oh my gosh, this is COVID.
Yeah.
I called my sisters and I said, you need to come to the house now. And luckily they live close. I'd say they were here within 15 minutes. And we had called 911 to get an ambulance here to make sure that he got into the hospital quickly so they could help him. So he went into the hospital that Friday, October 23rd. October 29th, he passed away.
Yeah. And you were able to be in there to say goodbye. Were you there at the end?
No.
Did they make you leave?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They said, just there's nothing more we can do for him. You should leave. And we knew what was going to happen. I'm sorry. It's just really hard.
Yeah, no, it's okay. I understand. And I also know, Mary, that your birthday is October 23rd. So you just like to have this whole mess of anniversaries and days that are just right packed in this really emotional time.
Oh, very. Mm-hmm. Yeah, when we were sitting out in the parking lot, that was my birthday.
Mm-hmm.
And I said to the girls, you know what? I don't really feel good. And I said, I feel like I got like the flu. Well, the next day, Tammy and I went to get tested, and we both tested positive.
Wow. So do you think that he came home? I know this is all conjecture, but that he came home from the hospital when they said he didn't have COVID, that he did?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
most definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because he wasn't feeling good from the time he came home from the hospital. We didn't know why he was so released, so fast.
I want you to talk for a few minutes, Mary. I know you have a lot of anger and a lot of emotion about all of this. And so, how a year later are you feeling and coping with all of these anniversaries and these days leading up to this? How are you coping and how are you with your anger?
Well, I have faith. I'm a Catholic and I believe in just going to church, say my rosary, and I get through it. And the help of my three daughters. I wouldn't know what to do without them. They pump me up to get through these days. They're funny girls and they just help me. And I know that's exactly what Bob would want us to do. And it's just very hard living without him, but I'm doing it. And it's not easy, but I do it every day. And there's times I have good days, and then there's days that I do things that make me happy. And then I think, oh, I got to tell Bob about this. And right then I think, oh, that's not going to happen, you know. And there's nights I reach over and he's not there, you know. I'm sorry. I'm
Oh,
just
it's
really
fine.
sorry that I cry, but it's very hard. But I try to do something that makes me happy for me every day, you know, to get through the hard times. I mean, you know, I just do. And
Yeah.
when the anniversaries come up, I think of the good 57 years we had, and I'm blessed that we had that. And see, he was going to turn 80 this year, and that was going to be hard because he always wanted to get to 80, you know, because his dad died at 59. He says, I passed that, you know. If I make it to 80, he keeps saying to me. And I said, oh my gosh, the treatments you're getting and everything, your kidney treatments, you're going to be fine. Well, it got to be that the kidney treatments weren't helping as well as we thought they were going to be. And they thought maybe they'd have to do the dialysis up at the center, whereas he was so lucky to be able to do them at home. And we had this nice, clean environment. And I said, I just would hate for you to, not that it wasn't clean up there, that's not it. It just was morbid to me. And for us to do it every night here, and he'd get up and he'd unhook and he was fine. And it was going so good until the end.
Yeah.
And, you know, but with Tammy here and we helped him, he was a different man. He loved it. He loved us helping him. And it wasn't such a chore for him, you know. It took that burden off of him, you know. And he kept saying, I hate for you girls to have to do this. We didn't mind a bit, you know. We wanted to do it to help him, to cheer him up. That was because he was getting very disgusted with his life. That's all I know. That's all I can say is it's just very, very hard. I mean, I never thought I'd have to lose him this fast. And I know a lot of people lose him earlier, but I didn't want to.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's such a disconnect. There's such an isolating feeling, I think, with COVID and the PPE and the gloves and the masks and the whole get up, but then also going in and saying goodbye and really just hoping and praying that he can hear you.
That's it. Yeah. That's all I wanted. I just wanted him to squeeze my hand, look at it, open his eyes, something. But I knew when they vented him, that was the start of the end.
Mhm.
And I hated for him to go through that because it wasn't many days before that I could talk to him. What, FaceTime?
Mhm.
FaceTime. And he says, I know he said this to me. He said, one of the nurses said, you're going to die. And I said, she couldn't say that to you, Bob. I just know she didn't say that to you, you know. And I just lost it. I really did because that's so hard to hear. And I don't think she said that. He must have misunderstood her, but he felt that way. He felt like he says, you've got to get me out of here. I know I'm going to die and I can't do a thing. There's nothing you can do. You just can't do a thing. And they're laying up there. And what are they thinking? Where's mom? Where's Mary? Where's the kids? You know, I know he wasn't in his right mind, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand. My mom had Alzheimer's. And so at the end, when they moved her to a COVID nursing home, I can only imagine what was going through her mind. She was also almost entirely deaf at that point.
Oh my
And
God.
so the masks and the gloves and everything. She probably had no idea what was going on, and she only knew me as a friendly face, as someone who came to visit her.
Right.
I can I that's the part that sticks with me the most, is what was she thinking and how was she feeling, and the frustration that there was absolutely
Oh,
nothing I could do except be outside a window or in a car or talk to her on a screen.
yeah. That's what I always prayed, that my parents and like Bob never had to get Alzheimer's, that they would know us. And I know he laid up there day after day. And with him being vented, we couldn't really talk to him. It was hard for him to speak.
Well, he
Mhm.
was sedated. I mean,
He was
it's
so sedated. I know they just kept him as rested as they could. I just feel sorry for those nurses that have to make all those decisions and go through that.
Yeah. Yeah, I've thought of that too.
We would call up there and just say, every time that phone rang and it was them, we just prayed for good news. And then all they did was ask us if they could do like the next step to make him comfortable.
So you were able to have some FaceTime visits with him when he was in the hospital after he'd been on the ventilator?
Not after the ventilator, before that.
Okay.
Yeah. We never
yes,
did see him being with the ventilator in.
no, I mean, no. Before they had vented him, we were able, when the nurses had time,
We
we
could,
were able to FaceTime with him, but he didn't want to. He just, it just made him incredibly sad,
mm,
Mhm.
and, like mom said, we would, when, we could talk to him, we did everything we could, to cheer him up. And it seemed like, so he went in on the 23rd, and apparently he had had a heart attack.
yeah,
He had had a heart attack, but
at home here.
yes, here, that, so that day, he had went into cardiac arrest, but apparently he had a heart attack or something when he was in the ER, but they couldn't tell us when he had a heart attack. And we're just like, what? And so that surprised us. So we would, we got the phone calls, from the hospital, and I mean, in the beginning it sounded positive.
He was going to get to come home.
Yes, I mean, and it was just like, oh my, his oxygen levels are improving, and we're gonna be able to probably move him, out of the COVID area, and so we're,
Hope.
hope, yes, I mean, we're so hopeful. And then it just got to be like the 28th, I don't even know what day he got vented, but it
Mm.
wasn't long, after that. And
We lost contact.
Yeah. Yeah, the isolation of it was probably very hard for him,
Oh,
especially with the FaceTime calls, and maybe that's why he didn't want to, is it just in the end made him feel more lonely.
right.
There's such an isolation with just COVID in general on both sides. The people in the hospitals, I can't even imagine, and then the families
Uh-uh.
on the outside.
Nope.
Yeah. Were you able to have a memorial service or a funeral for him after he passed?
Yes, but it was just strictly a mass, and it was just my children and like his sister, very few of us. We asked Father if we could just have like a mass, because a lot of people weren't even allowed to be in church
Mhm.
because of COVID. So that's why we couldn't have, well, we had a mass, but it wasn't really open to the parishioners.
Mhm.
We had about 30 people there, and then we didn't want to do anything. We didn't want to go anywhere. So all we did, we came back here, had pizza, and just That was it. That was the day. And he was cremated. So then we brought him home, remember? We brought his ashes home that day.
Well, he was cremated, and a few days after that, our good friend that was with the funeral home brought him home, due to COVID. And, mom and I having COVID, we did our isolation and things like that. But when, she brought him home to us, we sat outside. There
Yes.
was,
A nice day.
nobody came inside. We still sat outside, mask on, because we didn't want to, risk getting anybody, with that,
Right.
getting COVID.
Yeah, because you and both you and Mary, so both of you had COVID because Bob had COVID when he
Right.
came home from the hospital. Yes.
Mhm.
So you couldn't even hug family or be around family after he passed.
Nothing. And we wanted to do something. We wanted to have, just a little memorial for him, but it got to be that everything was popping up and it was getting worse with COVID. So next year on his birthday, May 3rd, at my daughter's house, we're going to have just a little open house. Anybody that wants to come can come and pay their respects that way. I know it sounds so far away, but we are going to do it.
Yeah, I had a memorial service for my mom, essentially, goodness, 8 or 9 months, 9 months after she passed away.
Uh-huh.
And it was so helpful. Even though you think it's been so long, emotionally, I was able to hug her sisters because when she passed away, I couldn't go hug her sisters even though they were close by
Uh-huh.
because of COVID. It is, I think no matter when you have it, I think the emotion of it for me anyway was just so immensely helpful to just have everybody together and have a memorial service and share memories and laugh and food and hug and all the things that we did not do.
I hope I have that feeling.
I hope you do
I'll
too.
think of you, Jennifer, and I'll say, Jennifer did it. I can do it.
I hope you do. I had a lot of people tell me because I was leading up to it so emotional and
Uh-huh.
I had a lot of people tell me it helps, it helps. And so again, just like you're going to trust me, I had to trust them that it helped.
Okay.
So one of the things that I like to ask people is the world wants to move on. There's a lot of people that want to move on and they want things to go back to quote unquote normal. How do you feel changed by your husband's loss, Mary? And how are you adjusting to the new, your how things are different for you? I don't want to say new normal, but how are you adjusting to life now?
Wow. It's like like it's different, but yet it's not. I still feel like he's here. I know that sounds weird, but I feel like he's still here and I try to go on and it's a lot of uh, decisions that I have to make now by myself, But I do, like I said, have my girls and they do help me. But there's certain things that I have to do on my own. And it is different. It's totally different and I'm trying to make it like it was before, but it's not the same.
Mhm.
That's all I can say. It's just not the same.
Tammy, how about you? With the world moving on, you going back to work in an office or with around people, how are you feeling and coping with the changes, a year and a half after this all started?
Mm.
It's how I view COVID in general, or how am I handling life without my father due to this COVID?
Well, either either or it, there's a push for things to just go back to normal, or to go forward and sort of forget that this happened. And how are you coping with that, because you lost your dad to COVID?
Yeah.
Right. I truthfully, I get mad at, just even just the little things. You know, people are supposed to be, wearing masks that aren't vaccinated, and or even still wear your mask if you are vaccinated, stuff like that, still be considered of people's personal space, and everything. And if I'm around somebody, and and they bring up COVID, oh, this COVID's not real. And I just look at them, and I'm just like, do you not understand what happened to my family? My father passed away from COVID. How could you stand there and tell me, oh, COVID's not real? And it takes so much in me to not just lash out at them. And I know that sounds awful, but I just it's scary. And people think, oh, COVID's gone, or COVID didn't exist. But as we move forward these days, I think we're very cautious, about how we interact now. When I'm at work, and say a client comes in, they put out their hand for a handshake, and I'm just like, well, how about a elbow bump? And it still, after all this time, that social interaction, I'm still leery of it, and I don't, even though, mom and I have had COVID, you can still be a carrier. I don't want to get anybody sick. I don't want to put anybody into that situation. But back to your question, how am I feeling about it all? I mean, it's just sad, and I don't want anybody to go through what we went through. And it is different. The world is different, and I understand, people want to get back to their, quote unquote normal life. And and they may feel like they can, but I mean, for us, it'll never be normal
Never.
again.
Mm-mm.
Never. And it's so hard. We don't I mean, I told my boss the other week, and he's a great guy, and he's a great listener. And I told him, I said, there's not a single day, of course, that doesn't go by that we don't think about him. With or without COVID, I'm sure that would be the same.
Mm-hmm.
But it's even harder because of COVID, because it's in the news. You turn on the TV, it's
Statistics.
yes, everything is right there in your face, reminding you, hey, this is how your father passed away. And the images on TV, we don't watch the news.
Mm-mm.
I mean, it's so many bad memories. So yeah, so it's definitely different. And we just move a little different. And if we're watching something on TV, funny and light, you know my automatic reaction is like, oh, wait a second, there, you're closer than 6 feet away, and what are you doing hugging somebody, and where's your
Mm-hmm.
mask? And so it's just it is strange. And it's, you just think about those things when you're watching older shows and whatnot, and you're just like, oh my gosh, they're not social distancing, and they're touching and hugging and all that. And it's just, that's just the first thing that pops into my head is, wait a second.
Yeah.
Jennifer, they say time heals, but I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I've heard that a lot too. That's one of those platitudes I probably would have said before I lost my mom. Oh, time heals. Just give it time.
Uh-huh.
And it's been more than a year, and it still feels like my mom died yesterday.
I
And
know.
uh, the
Exactly.
gr- the grief is powerful, and I think a lot of what we go through is like what Tammy was talking about. COVID is everywhere. You can't turn on the TV without it. You can't look at the newspaper without it. You can't go on your phone without seeing it. It's everywhere in social distancing signs. It's in every store. It's on billboards as you drive down the road. It is a constant daily reminder that we lost our family members to COVID.
I
So
know.
the grief is just so heavy, and I don't know. I feel like COVID grief is, it's grief, but I feel like it's different. And I also don't think that time um, makes it better. I think we just learn to carry it as time goes on. We learn to carry the grief differently, or
Mm-hmm.
carry it with us. And I watch silly movies like the Pitch Perfect trilogy. I don't know if you've ever seen Pitch Perfect, but there's 3 of those
Yeah.
movies. I love them, and
Uh-huh.
I just watch things that my mom used to love to watch, like
Uh-huh.
Hallmark movies, and you
Yeah,
know,
we laugh at those. Yes.
yeah,
And the Golden Girls.
oh yeah,
We try to do something that cheers us up, but we, like I said, when I hear something when I'm by myself, I think, oh, I can't wait to get home to tell Bob. And that's when it hits me again that it ain't gonna happen.
yeah, and that's that time thing. I don't think it heals. I just don't think it makes it any less.
Nope.
Yeah. So how are things you're in West Virginia, right?
Right.
Okay. So how are things there? How do you think your state is handling the things with the pandemic right now?
Well, we're it's how do I even explain this? So, we're told that our numbers are good and they're going down, because they're getting shots into the arms of people. But every day it's like, oh, okay, we've had 2 more deaths to report, just in our county that we live in. And I'm just like, okay, so how are our numbers getting better when we still have an increase in deaths? So I don't understand that at all. And where we live in West Virginia, there are very rural areas in the state, and people are finding it hard to get to a place to get vaccinated. And I just feel for those people. Honestly, I think our state government encourages, of course, people to go get vaccinated. You can go, to this drugstore, you can go to your health department. But I don't, it boggles my mind. And how our state says, oh, we're doing okay, we're improving, but how are these deaths still happening then from COVID? How can they say, oh, our numbers are good, when we're still getting COVID deaths? And we have, just a handful of really, large hospitals in our state. And, over the past few months, it's just like, okay, our numbers, we're doing good. Oh, but by the way, the capacity at the hospital, there, we're full. And so I don't know.
It
how
hasn't stopped.
no, it hasn't stopped. And and here, we're still having these deaths, but it's like, okay, we're not going to have a mask mandate and things like that. And it boggles my mind. I just can't wrap my head around it. And from I don't know I don't know if it's from where we had COVID, and my thoughts, I lose track easily on things like that. And I don't know if it's the side effects of having COVID and losing my father to that.
Mhm.
But it's just, I mean, it's just, I think, and I think our state, is trying. Our state is definitely trying, but I just don't understand how they can say it's we're good, but we're still having these deaths. But numbers have never really been my thing. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's got to be heartbreaking too now, uh, to have people still dying from COVID with vaccines and
Right.
all of that. I feel for people right now who are struggling with COVID death, that it's just happened with a family member. That, yeah, like you said, boggles my mind. That's got to be um, such a hard thing. Such a hard
Mhm.
thing.
yeah.
So, Mary, have you submitted your husband's name to any of the memorials that have gone on around the country, like the Yellow Heart Memorial and some of the others?
Uh-huh. Well, we did. Tammy got somehow, and we put the flag in Washington, D.C.
Oh,
Did you see that?
I did. It was so beautiful.
Yes, and look at all those people who had died. Just look at, I mean, that's just not all of them, but a lot. And that was so neat. And we're still waiting to see when they took all the flags down, where they're going to go.
Hmm.
And this was Flags in America.
Yeah, the flags that they put out in Washington, D.C.
Right.
Yeah,
We submitted his name there.
I would love to know what the plan is for that, because a national memorial seems like something that those flags and the stories and the
I
pictures and all
know.
of. Mhm.
Oh, I love that.
I mean, it was a beautiful installation that the artist did. And as they had a white flag for every COVID death. And I don't think, I mean, you hear the numbers and all of that, but until you saw those white flags, and the area was just covered in white,
Mhm.
and it was just like, oh my gosh, this just isn't us, you know
Yeah.
and we knew, of course, it was happening, worldwide and in the nation and everything like that. But then after we saw those flags,
She brought us to that attention, that's for sure, to see
yes,
that.
and we were able, to get a flag for Dad, and right before they, had the cutoff, and so was he was no longer really a number to us, if that makes any sense.
Oh, it does.
He's going to be something in, the pandemic, of course, is going to be something that's going to go down in history. But he's now part of this history, his name.
Mhm.
And it's just not, oh, the 4,000 death or whatever. It's no, Bob Dilly, he passed away from COVID.
Yeah, and there's something powerful about saying their names and having each person, like, the gravity that every single one of those flags is a human being
Right.
and a family around that human being that's grieving.
Right. Right. And Tammy wrote, didn't you write the little message on there? And it was,
Mhm.
and all those volunteers that took the time to put all those messages on those flags.
Mhm.
That was unreal. That was
Yeah.
beautiful. That was a beautiful thing.
He would have he would have liked that.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to. I feel odd sometimes when I talk about it in past tense because I still feel like,
He's here.
yes, as Mom said, he's here. I mean, I, he's always watching over us, and so
Mm.
I don't like to use the past tense for whatever. I don't know. I just don't feel right using it.
No, it feels wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I just feel like, he, like, Mom babied him so much. I
Yeah,
mean,
he was
he
spoiled.
he was very spoiled.
And that's not a generation now, trust me. I tell the girls, do better with your husbands, and they don't.
Oh,
No, no, not like I did.
well, that is true. That is true.
Yeah.
There was you know, right after, I moved in, and he was, after a few months, when he was coughing and not sleeping and not breathing and all that stuff, we gave him a bell to
Oh,
ring, in case, we were in the other room because, he couldn't holler for us, and he was hooked up to dialysis. And I remember that very night we gave him that bell. Mom and I are in the TV room and he rings it. And of course, we're on high alert all the time. And so I jumped up and I went in there and I was just like, what's wrong? And he looked at me, he said, could you cover my feet? They're cold. And I was
yeah.
just like, oh
Hmm.
my gosh. I was just like, I was like, Dad. And I was just like, yes, I will cover up your toes. And he's like, thanks, Tam. And he
Oh,
just, he was spoiled, and we did not care.
no, but I got it in return too.
Yeah. Yeah, well, after 57 years.
Yep.
You guys, yep. So you're coming up this Friday on the anniversary, and what I'd like to talk about here at the end is what you're going to be doing either as
Mhm.
a family or separately that day to get not to get through that but also to remember.
Well, we're going to we always take flyers to the cemetery up in Ridgewood. That's in West Virginia, where his parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles all are buried. We do that every spring and every fall. So this year, but Bob's not up there, but we're still going to take a trip, Tammy and I. The other two girls cannot get off of work, but we're going to leave early in the morning and go up and put the fall flyers on and talk to his mom and dad up there. And then there's a little country restaurant. I said to Tammy, I want to take you to because that's the place Dad and I always stopped at after we went to the cemetery. So that's going to be our day. It's going to be a good day. It's going to be a good day to do that. So, and he would appreciate us doing that, putting the flyers on for fall. I don't know what else we could do but to sit home and cry. And we probably will up there, but that's okay. That's where we want to be.
Yeah. Yeah, that's beautiful. I like that.
Thank you.
He was born in Richwood,
Uh huh.
and so and he, as you guys always went up there and
He
took
loved it.
flowers, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so his home where he was born.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That sounds lovely. That sounds like something that will be healing, and also you'll be bringing him along with you and going to visit his family. I like that.
Yes, it's a beautiful, beautiful little town.
Mhm.
In the Right now, everything's so pretty in the mountains. That helps.
But I can't believe it's been a year.
I know. We just don't know where every month went. We just don't.
Yeah. Yeah, I experienced that too. I feel like the 4th of July was 10 years ago, but
Oh,
I feel like the day my mom died was yesterday. It's it's a very odd time warp that we're in, and I don't know if it's because of the continued reminder about COVID or if it's just a part of this grieving process, and I don't know. But it is a really odd thing that I feel. Where did the time go?
hmm. And I think, oh, there's so many things I wish I would have asked him, you know. For one thing, I came home the other day and I pulled in the garage, and Tammy always locks this door going out to the garage, which Bob and I never locked. Or I went to turn the knob and it was locked. And I thought, I don't have a key to this. Bob, where in the world would you have put a key? I don't have the key to get in this house, you know.
Oh.
And the front door was locked, the storm door. So there I was, standing out there in the garage crying, where would he have put that key? I called my neighbor and he came up. He said, well, we'll just have to take the doorknob off somehow. And I thought, okay, there's a sign hanging up in the garage. I took that sign off for some reason. There hung the key,
Oh,
right by the door. Don't ask me why I took that off, but there was the key. And we never discussed where he put the darn key. You know, there's just so many little things you think of.
mhm.
And they're good things, but yet you wish you could ask him or tell him, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm. Don't you wish you could talk to your mom
Oh
again?
my oh my gosh, every day. There's so
I
many
know.
questions that I have now, especially given that her memories got blurry about 10 years ago. There's so many things that I would like to ask her about her young life and how she
Right.
met my dad and just lots of
Yeah.
different things. Yeah.
And look at all the time we had to do that.
Mhm.
But life went on and we went on with our lives and never thought of asking questions like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I hope time heals.
Yeah, I do too.
It won't take away our memories, that's for sure, but maybe it'll make it somewhat easier. Like I try to think it's all going to happen to every one of us, you know. But I didn't want it to happen now.
Yeah. Oh, well, Mary, you got me all teary here at the end.
I'm so sorry.
No,
I'm
that's okay.
sorry.
That's what this is for. This is for healing.
Yes, it is. Thank you. And it did. It had us get these feelings out.
Mhm. Yep. Yep, that's why I do it every single time. I don't feel worse or heavier or more sad. I feel better and like healing happens for you,
Mhm.
for me, hopefully for you too, Tammy.
Thank you. I hope. It's just,
Hard.
it is hard.
Mm.
And as you said, Jennifer, COVID is just a COVID death is
Hard to think that we had to go through that.
right.
Mhm. Do you know anybody else in your personal circle of family and friends who've lost someone to COVID?
Had done what?
Um,
Have
Lost.
lost
yes.
someone to COVID?
Yes, in my parish, it was so weird. We're always at the same mass, 5 o'clock mass on Saturday night. One lady I found out, and I mean, she's a friend. She told me her husband was in the hospital with COVID. Within 2 weeks, we all lost our husbands,
Mm,
all three of us. And I was talking to her the other Saturday night, and she said, our anniversaries are coming up, Mary. And I said, I know, Pearl, and it's going to be hard.
mhm. Yeah. I just thought to ask that right now because I don't know anybody in my personal circle or of family or friends who've lost someone to COVID. So that adds to a little bit of loneliness, just for me where I'm at because I don't know anybody else. I
Really?
No,
Mm.
no, not a single person. Oregon did a very good job of closing the state down, staying closed for a really long time. And even now, we have a mask mandate indoors and then outdoors if you can't be socially distanced. And so our overall case numbers are low, and the death numbers, given the national level, are low. But it also, I don't know anybody else.
Hmm.
So that's in part why I do this, because I felt so lonely and alone in what I was going through, and it helps me so much to talk to other people.
Hmm. And then I have a real good friend. Her sister's husband died about 2 weeks after that, and she was in the same situation as we were. We could not get in to the hospitals to visit. She did get to go up right before he died. And that
Mhm.
was it.
Yeah.
So I know quite a few people, yes. And it was just so funny that all three of us within 2 weeks, were sitting in church by ourselves.
Mhm. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank both of you for talking to me today. I appreciate it. I really, really do. And I have not ever done an interview with two people before, so I'm glad that we did this, because it was nice to talk to both of you and have perspectives from both a mother and a daughter who went through this experience.
Thank you.
And thank you, yes, for doing this and having our voices out
Mm.
there and letting us talk through it. It's
It
just
was easier with both of us because we could help each other.
Yeah.
yes, and a lot of people don't understand what we're going through. Everybody that's lost someone to COVID, I just, it's so hard for me to explain it, to a friend of mine. It's just, and so this is very helpful, knowing that, I don't even know, helpful that, knowing you went through this, Jennifer. That sounds so bad, but knowing, you're having feelings as well, and it's nice to talk to somebody. I guess that's
Mhm.
what I'm trying to say is.
And my other two daughters, they're doing great. They're handling it fine, but you don't talk much about it to them. You know what I mean? They
Mhm.
just there's days that I'll say something and my daughter will say, I just don't want to talk about it now today. And so that's fine, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, it is interesting how family members, especially sisters or brothers and sisters, they deal with grief very differently. My sister and I have dealt with my mom's death in the long span of, yeah, I guess it's 15 months, 14 or 15 months, which just seems crazy, but we are dealing with it very differently. So
Mhm.
we don't typically talk about our feelings about it at all right now, because she's in a completely different place than I am. I could talk about my mom all day.
Right. Everybody handles it different.
Mhm. Yep. That is so true, and something that I never would have thought. I would have thought, because my sister and I both knew my mom and had this experience with her, that we would both grieve in this parallel track and be able to be there for each other the whole time. And that is not how it's turned out.
Oh,
And I I think that's true for me and my sisters, going back, to the day, that we were able to go to the hospital on October 29th. We didn't hug. No one hugged each
you
other.
couldn't.
We couldn't. We didn't
Well,
want to risk getting anybody sick. It was just,
right.
we left the hospital, we're standing in the parking lot, and it's like, okay, bye.
Mhm.
I mean, and it's, I we just try to, push the good memories in front
Yeah.
of,
The bed,
the bad.
the
And
loss.
Yeah.
Mhm.
so, but it is
Yeah.
different for everybody, and we don't talk much about it, but we
Yeah.
know we're here for each other, when we're ready.
Yep.
We all loved him so much. That was it. I mean, we had no bad times. Our family was very lucky raising the girls, and they had a great father, that's for sure. I mean, he was there. He wanted to do everything. He was the one that said, we can't miss anything,
Mhm. Yeah.
So they loved him like that.
Yeah, he sounds like he was a wonderful man, Mary.
So much. He really was.
Yeah, well, thank you both for taking the time to talk to me.
You take care of yourself too, Jennifer.
And that's the show, everyone. If you've lost a loved one to COVID and would like to share your story on the show, please send me an email. My email address is forthosewelostpodcast@gmail.com. If you like this episode, please share the show. Share it with your friends, share it on your social media, and once you've done that, rate and review this podcast on your favorite listening platform. And then go rate it on Apple Podcast, because that's where most of our new listeners come from. Ratings and reviews are the main way this podcast finds new listeners. So please share the show. Until next time.